So thank you again for joining us today. My name is Anji and I'm the Climate Justice NGO team coordinator. I'm joined here today by our CEO, Michelle, and Media and Communication Associate, Annie, and our Climate Associate, Faye. We're excited to have you at our first climate webinar in 2023, and I will pass it on to Michelle to make a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Anji, and welcome everyone again to our climate funding in a time of crisis. As Anji mentioned, this is our very first webinar for our NGO team, so it's really exciting to have you with us. Now more than ever, we feel that this is the time to really highlight the perspectives of non-governmental organizations that are mobilizing and empowering the local communities to collectively channel change regarding the climate crisis. We feel that this webinar will serve as a platform where like-minded organizations like ours can exchange information and learn about climate funding for environmental NGOs, but also social NGOs that are starting to realize that they need to be coming into this space as well. It aims to inform each of us within the sustainable NGO world on creative ways to seek funding for existing and for future projects. The webinar aims to foster this meaningful exchange of knowledge and how non-governmental organizations promote climate-related projects, because we as NGOs have a critical role, as we know, in leading green transformations, and we want your organization's perspective and we want your participation during the discussion session. So the webinar is structured into two parts. First, we'll have a panel of guest speakers from our various NGOs and their organizations, followed by the Q&A and that collaborative discussion with attendees. So please be prepared for that. So again, thank you for joining us today, especially the ones just coming in. Please keep yourself on mute if you're not speaking, and especially during the panel session. And then we'll open it up to everyone during the discussion. So I will hand it over to Anji.
Thank you, Michelle. We invite each of you to sign the Global Climate Pledge. If you are an NGO and would like to further work with us or want to know more information, just send us an email. I'll be putting the email in the chat. As Michelle mentioned, we will be having a Q&A and a full discussion after the speakers are finished. So if you have any questions throughout the event, please hold your question to the end or send a chat message to me, Anji. I can relay some of those questions to the panelists. I would first and foremost like to thank all of our speakers for joining us today. Each of them are very accomplished and have largely contributed to the sustainability sector through their works as NGOs around the world. If you'd like to see their full biographies, they have been posted on the Eventbrite for this webinar. Today, we'll be having speakers from China, Botswana, and Myanmar, so I'm very excited to learn from these diverse areas of influential leaders. We're happy to welcome Linda Wong, Tracy Sonny, and Friedor Jeske. Unfortunately, Emmanuel Sindikubwabo from Rwanda cannot be with us today as he's not feeling well, and we send his apologies for missing the event. Our first NGO speaker today will be Linda Wong from the China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation. Linda?
Linda, you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda from China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation. Thanks, Michelle and everyone for this wonderful opportunity. And I'm very humbled to be able to join this webinar. So my topic today is climate funding practice from a Chinese NGO. My organization, the China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation, is a national fundraiser. And let me do full screen. How to do that? Sorry. Like this. Okay. It is It was established in the year of 1985, and it was started from the reintroduction of endangered species, the Milu deers from the United Kingdom. After 30 years of conservation efforts from joint efforts from science, NGO, and policymaker community, now the species has survived, and its population has successfully grown to more than 10,000 in China. So this case was regarded as a very successful species conservation and reintroduction project. And today, the CPCGDF has been expanded from its whole conservation efforts to the whole biodiversity as well as green development. As you can see, our long name. I'm going to share two cases that, due to the time limits. The first one is about Madagascar, which the people suffered from severe drought and climate crisis. As you know, over the past 2 years, we have heard this news from the United Nations FAO, and after discussion and consultation, we decided to launch a project in China to help raise funds for the people in Madagascar. As you see, the picture, the left picture shows we went to schools to let children know what's going on in the remote country and what we can be of help. So the children was very touched, and they wrote a letter. As you see in the center picture, they donate their pocket money to support the people who suffered from the climate crisis. And the right picture shows we handed the letter to Her Eminence, the Minister of Environment of Madagascar, and we handed the donation to her. The whole project mobilized thousands of people join to help. Although the money is very small, but the goodwill has been handed, and I hope this goodwill can be continued in the future. The next story is about the climate crisis. You know, Pakistan, people in Pakistan suffered from a huge flood last year, which was really saddened news. And we worked with the UNHCR to launch a fundraising project in China, calling for people to help by providing sustainable livelihoods and job opportunity by clean energy. So okay, my time's up, so I will end here. This is also some other approaches like launching green standards to help fighting climate change. Okay, to you, Michelle.
Yes, thank you so very much. Linda, that was so informative. And one thing that I really felt was so important was the fact that the passion for the projects that you were working on from the students and younger people to donate was such an integral part. I haven't really seen that with some of the larger NGOs, which I know that you get funding from all over. So that was very inspiring. And I know that we worked with you collectively with the Madagascar teams, with Seed Madagascar, and making some of those connections down the road. So it was so nice to see that the funding got over to Madagascar and to those in need. So thank you so very much for sharing that.
Thank you. Okay, I'll end my screen sharing.
And Anji, would you like to do the next introduction?
Yes, of course. Our next speaker will be Tracy Sonny from the Botswana Climate Change Network. I'll pass down to Tracy.
Thank you very much, Angie. So my presentation, I'll probably give first an overview of funding, financial flows, climate financial flows coming into Africa. Just to give you a picture of what we are, what we're experiencing, and then I'll go down from the regional level to the national level, and probably share also what kind of projects are being funded, and even the position even of Botswana and other countries in accessing this funding. So for Africa, what we are realizing, or what have been our experience over the past years, particularly, I'll take it from the Paris Agreement. I don't want to go beyond or before that, but what is required for Africa? Africa requires close to 15 billion, which is about 0.93% of the regional GDP, to just, address its climate change challenges. But so far, what we are seeing is only 12% is coming through. This is the financing that is coming through into the region. And finance is coming at different, is either coming in as grants, and but I'll discuss also the trends that we have been seeing over the past years, particularly from Katowice, COP, and then up to even the Glasgow COP. The trends that we have been seeing, what type of funding, the bilateral talks that have been going on, which is also one of the major things that really concerns us as civil society. But now coming again back to the financial flows on climate finance, the climate finance is on the NDC, the National Determined Contributions, which is what really is the focus of the Paris Agreement. Most of the submissions that were done, countries require close to 2.8 trillion to meet the demands of their NDCs up to 2030. And only 30 billion so far is available, not really available, because most of the money is in pledges. These are pledges which are not really committed funds, which is one of the biggest concerns that we face as civil society also in Africa. So, which means still Africa to meet its NDC, and remember, there's been this call over the years for countries to ramp up their ambitions. So if we are to ramp up our ambitions, and currently we are facing the issue of less financial flows coming into the continent, how are we going to meet our NDC demands? And when we shift again, we shift gears. In Africa, we talk more of adaptation. And the adaptation fund and other adaptation finance, it's too little still for the region. We are saying we are already experiencing the impacts of climate change. What we require is to adapt. We need to adapt. Of course, we can bring in the issue of mitigation. And we know renewable energy, just transition, these are some of the things that are coming into view. But we still have a long way to go, because we still need an African narrative on just transition. What is it? What does it mean to us as Africa? So that we can be able to address this and be able to finance, to be able to craft our projects, targeted projects on just transition. So you find that if you have the adaptation fund still, of course, since 2010, they have committed around 1 billion. But is everyone able to access this? Still, this money is coming in as pledges. And of course, we have the board. Each and every year, they approve a certain budget, but this money is still little for the different countries. Of course, per country will be asked to access close to 20 million, but still it's not enough. So you find that most of the projects now coming down to us as civil society, some of these projects you don't have access to. They happen at the government level. And then for us, civil society groups, small groups, usually it's hard to even know that some of these projects exist or this finding exists. And we can attribute to lack of information flow between us and the funders. You take your Jeff, we may be familiar with the Jeff, how do you read the Jeff funding, but then it's mostly on the small grants program. But then there are bigger, medium or bigger size programs or funding that we may access, but we are not familiar with the processes. Same with the GCF. It's hard for civil society to even access some of the money because some of the small entities does not meet the requirements of the GCF. And if you can't, or if you don't belong, let's say to an international non-governmental organization, then it becomes hard to access that money. And then the modalities to access this money also, it's another challenge for most of the civil society groups in Africa. I don't want to talk of capacity. Over the years, we are always saying Africa needs capacity, but it's not about capacity. It's all about how do we align to the trends, to the new trends of accessing the funds. And how do we develop and how do we, craft our concepts, craft our programs to suit the new developments. But also what worries us also coming from an African perspective is the narrative, like I said, of climate finance, particularly which is more focused on mitigation rather than adaptation. And then with the recent loss and damage, last year we had the loss and damage mechanism coming through. This is something that is still being developed. And we know we have huge challenges with floods, and most of the African countries will need to access this funding. So it's where we are saying, how do we craft, how do we fit in, how do we design these finance mechanisms, learning from the lessons of the GCF, the Green Climate Fund, and how do we design the loss and damage mechanism, funding mechanism, the new one, so that it suits even the smallest of the organizations at the local grassroots level. Can they be able to access that funding? Because these are the people then who will be able to reach out to the local communities and assist the disadvantaged or the most affected communities at that level. So the projects, of course, like I said, our narrative is on adaptation. The projects, mostly even in Botswana, they're much more on adaptation, but we are also promoting, the need for research, the need for integration of indigenous knowledge in addressing climate change. And this is the direction also that we are trying to bring in, try to redesign our concepts so that they suit. But also, of course, technology development. We have been focusing much more on what I would say demonstration projects, but it's time now to move to replication, because you can't keep on demonstrating. You can't keep on trying the feasibility, but you need now to adopt and go beyond feasibility, go beyond pre-feasibility to feasibility, which is what also last year when we were at COP, it was being something that the technology team was calling on, that as we access the funding, because of course we look at how the financing mechanisms are their relation, or how they are working together with these technology mechanisms. So the call is on now the countries to move, particularly the developing countries, to move from these pre-feasibility projects to mostly adoptable replication stages. And I'll keep on referring back to capacity. I no longer want to say we don't have the capacity in Africa, because we've been saying that, but it's on how do we refine and redesign our concepts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It's so nice to have the big perspective of looking at where is the funding needing to go and where will it be coming from, and then also recognizing that it's not set up for most of the small NGOs that are out there. I think we need to address that for sure. So thank you very much for your insight and information today. And Anji, if you would like to.
Yeah, our final speaker is Friedor Jeske from Thant Myanmar. Friedor.
Good evening, everyone here now from Myanmar. Yes, so from our side, I will take you now in a very different direction. So from Tracy's side, from the large picture to here, something very tiny. So we're operating a small non-profit business. We are working mainly in waste management, circular economy, sustainable consumption and production here in Myanmar only. So we are purely national. And as you may know, we face here currently a triple whatever amount of crisis. We have political, then we have a livelihood crisis now for sure going on. And then in the long run, we for sure have then also the climate crisis going on. So the situation here is quite severe, and we needed to learn to, let's say, find a way into dealing this one. So we started as a purely voluntary movement. So, and those of you who work in voluntary engagements, they know after some time, everyone go home, right? So that is a big problem in voluntary engagements, right? So if you want to keep this going, you either need to be capable of finding always new topics to keep people moving voluntarily, or you need to professionalize. So what we decided is actually to professionalize. So we try to really, instead of only to say there are problems, now we have a very specific waste and plastic issue where we were focusing on pollution, instead of basically just saying, okay, we have pollution problems, to basically become the entity who is then developing the solutions. So, and this was over the years our main aim, that we tried to kind of build solutions which works on the local level. And so that had for us strong engagement with the government for some times and in the beginning, and then for sure, since we run into our political crisis, now we have a much stronger community focus on how we would engage on the topic of pollution. So in regards to funding, so there is also like, I would kind of say from our side, we were maybe a little bit lucky because of being willing to move and to become a very professional organization. We kind of occupied our tiny niche. And so anyone in the country who wanted to kind of work on the topic was basically then shift money to us. So we had actually for some time, at least we were able to access quite a lot of money, mainly coming then through international development agencies. So a lot we had from the World Bank, we had then from EU and then from UN agencies. So through these funding mechanisms, we mainly were sustaining ourselves. And then since we run then into a coup structure here, most of these fundings actually pulled out. So it became much more complicated to operate. So now we need to work on a much smaller basis and much more localized, rather than trying to expand into the direction of how to work on a national level, which, since we cannot work really with the government anymore, is became much more like the focus for us. So since then, since now 2 years, we have a very, very strong community focus. And we work, since you said, we work on pollution. So we work then on on rural waste management in villages, how to set up basically waste collection system, how would they can reduce waste, what kind of mechanisms would they have here. So in urban areas, we work a lot then with the informal sector, the waste pickers and all these areas. So there is now our main approach. But yeah, I think in regards to funding, it will get more and more complicated from the perspective of this country, just because Myanmar is in a political difficult situation. Yeah, I keep it short.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. That was great. And it's so important, I think, to realize that we're all in a different space. Some people have a lot of funding. They work with larger countries that have funding that's available, and to look at the situation and how to adapt, I think, is a really important part of moving forward with any sort of funding strategy as we go into this next phase, because we're all going to end up being in different spaces at different times, I think. So thank you so much, Friedor. And now Anji, if you would like to just share some information about Q&As, because we definitely want to dive into this next section where we can have our speakers answer any questions that you may have, and then we'll go into discussion after that.
Yeah, I would just like to thank the panelists again for sharing their innovative climate funding initiatives and efforts. And now it's the time for Q&A. Audience member, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll put them in the chat right now if you would like them answered by the panelists.
Any questions out there?
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
Do you hear me? Okay. This is
Yes.
UN John from South Sudan. And I think maybe I'm the only person attending this webinar. And maybe the information did not reach out to some other environmental NGOs. And it is a privilege to represent my country. I think we fall in the same category of African countries that have issues accessing fund or do not even have strategies to access the fund. So I want to ask Tracy on her presentation about access to funds and requirements. So the budgets that she was describing, which African countries are accessing it, like for my case, I come from East Africa. And so what are the requirements for countries to access funds?
And I think
What
that
are
was
the
to you,
requirements
Tracy.
and which
Tracy?
countries are
Yeah.
accessing those funds? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The requirements, they differ with each finance mechanism. And I wouldn't be want to be specific because I touched on different, the GCF and others, but the requirements are quite different for each. And I remember the last time we were looking at, let's say for countries, especially the GCF, they'll give you a ceiling of countries that have an income of about $10 million US. And you can imagine for a small grassroots grassroots NGO, it's something that is beyond. You cannot even act. Your budget each year can't even go beyond. Some don't go beyond $50,000 or even $20,000 for some of the small grassroots communities. NGOs. So the requirements, they differ with each finance mechanism, but then there are small grants programs, like the Global Environment Program, the Global Environment Fund, the GEF under the UNDP. They do, these are some of the easily accessible funding that you can get. And then we look at in country, depending on the level at which your country is, to take Botswana, for example, they consider as a middle income country. So most of the funding we don't receive. And in this way, we have to strategize on how to access the funding, because most countries don't give us, or most countries don't fund us, or some of this existing financing mechanism we can't access. So usually we partner with the different entities from across the region to access then the funding that is offered by different governments. So they are those small grants that you can access, but then the bigger grants are quite difficult. But also the Africa Development Bank, they have a very good finance mechanism, which is the Africa Climate Change Fund. But still also it is quite competitive, because I remember we tried to apply for it in 2 years back, and you had close to 5,000 NGOs trying to access the fund. So you can imagine, and they're only going to take maybe 10 or 15 or 20 NGOs. So there's a lot of competition. So we have to be innovative about the kind of funding that we, be innovative with the funding. And then also, like I said, there's a trend that we have been seeing since Katowice, where countries are now getting into these bilateral talks. And what is worrying is what kind of funding is coming is going to trickle down to Africa, because you may try to access the funding through your governments, but then what kind of funding is it? Is it grants or this is a loan that is coming through? So there's a lot of shift from the grants-based approach of this climate finance to more, there are a lot of it's unclear how the money is being, the modalities around that finance, or the climate finance that is being negotiated by the developed countries and the developing countries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. And I also want to say, I see a comment from Wong Eric. It says small organizations can partner with networks to access funding. If you have an example of that, Wong Eric, feel free to take yourself off mute and share. If you can hear us. And then here's another one, Mamoswe from South Africa. How do we get funding for our CBO? We have built a village kitchen that will use the biogas digester to cook. We want to do renewable energy demonstration and plant carbon plants to most affected communities to decarbonize. So if anybody has a good answer for that. Oh, yeah, Brave. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great. This is Brave from Zambia. Working with the Zambia Biogas and Alternative Energy. We are into production of cooking gas, which is methane, and also alleviating into the deforestation. We're working with farmers around, let me say, the whole nation. We have done numerous biodigesters. Now, into this climate change, we would like to invite you and also understand how best you may come on board in terms of alleviating, because some seem to not undertaking. Others, those who have done the biodigesters they seem to be appreciating what we have been doing, especially women. Also, there is also lighting in terms of where there is no power grid, at least children, they are accessing light. And also the issue of the biosludge, which is the residue that comes out of the dung. We also do toilets, whereby people, they do, I think you understand of the biodigester, how it really works in the environment sector. So this helps, one, in the cooking sector, especially in the villages, farms, which helps farmers to cook from there, just the dung. And also it helps in fertilizing of their crops, where they do the inorganic, they abandon the inorganic fertilizer and they use this organic one, which, so would like also to measure into production of the organic fertilizer. So we are pleased to hear of you being on the platform, and we hope to see how best this could be helpful. And if you can also be one of the people who may be helping in the alleviation of the same. Otherwise, the demand is quite high, of which climate affecting Zambia is climate that affects the UK, everywhere, in short, the whole world. So how best may we access funds? And I understand we have the green energy, but as my lady from Botswana, the neighbor here, please, I think I'll be coming to Botswana in a week time. I would like to meet you there. You can get my email address on the side, whatever, the side, on the side I dropped the chat, so that we can talk more. But we seem to have limited access, especially that the government seems to be the one spearheading. So you find to say something that may be introduced this year, for it to come into maturation, it will take about maybe 5 to 10 years. And some of the things the government may not understand. So it may seem to be not adapted, but otherwise we are there to alleviate. And also on the other hand, a creation of jobs towards the unemployment, especially the youths, in this construction of the biodigesters, and also those materials which are being used in terms of constructing, it creates numerous activities around there. So it's quite porous that people can tap into it. Hence, your visitation and also your engagement is quite vital, that we may fight together this climate change. Hence, how best will you be of our assistance, as we are an association, and on the other hand, we are a company which is affiliated to the same. Thank you.
Yeah,
currently, I'm the chairperson of this association. Hence, we really need to engage with you people out there who are willing to be of help in alleviating the climate change issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that feedback. And I see another question. And you're welcome to raise your hand to ask the questions too. Try to keep the questions short. And also if you're answering, try to keep those short so we can get in as much information as possible to everyone. Because I know that being from all over the world, we have a variety of different areas of focus. So this is really interesting and really engaging for all of us to learn more. This is from I'm Eritus, working with TECOSO Tanzania. I want to know if there is a clear time frame for either application of the climate funding or to be partner in order to access the funding. And my email is, and I'm not exactly sure which application that might have been related to Sonny, what you were talking about.
Jumping.
Yes, I think, like I said earlier, the modalities and requirements differ with each finance mechanism.
Okay.
So you find that they have, and it's not always there. Those funding that is always open, but usually we have calls to say at this time you can send in your application within this time frame. But those that are always open, I think the GCF is always open. And I think even the adaptation fund, some of this funding mechanisms, they're always open, except for others which you have to sort of wait for their calls to be announced, and then they give you a time frame when to apply.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I see Annika, you have your hand raised, so feel free to, you can put your camera on too, if you like.
Hello, my name's Annika I'm living in Germany, but I was engaged with the Bruised Food Club in Uppsala for a while, and I still am. And at the moment, our organization, I have the feeling, is at a point where we are growing. So we also realized that we maybe need some new structures towards a more professional operating level. So maybe a question to Friedor, like for me, I don't have any experience in acquisition of funding or so. How was it for you? Like in general, maybe that's a question interesting for many smaller organizations. Which types of possibilities do we have, like funding by the state or funding by private type of investors, or like whatever, like just a bit more for me? It would be super interesting to hear a bit more hands-on, like what possibilities there could be for a small organization, like first steps or so.
Oh, great,
Oh, yeah,
great question.
Good question. Yeah, I guess. So I think it very much depends where you are living. So here in Myanmar, the easiest accessed money comes through maybe embassy funds. So these are mainly embassies from Europe or North American, so mostly, yeah, first world embassies, right? And they have small grant schemes, mostly on a yearly or even 6 monthly basis, where you then can access fundings around like $10,000 to $20,000, $30,000. So there, the proposal structure is very simple. The target organizations are anyway always local, so never NGOs or something can apply for that funding. So it is really made actually for local organizations. Since the funding is pretty small, also your let's say administrative requirements are not that high. So that is mainly the big problem, right? So like Tracy was saying, okay, there is funding for $10 million. So if you cannot show that you are capable of basically managing that money, you will not get that money, right? So a larger issue I see is that for larger funds or let's say donor organizations like the EU, for example, or UN organizations, they always prefer to give out larger amount of money, because that for them reduces their administrative costs. So if they give out $10 million, the administration is exactly the same as when they give $500,000. No, because they need to open the call, they need to kind of check on who is kind of applying for it. They need to, so the process for them the same for very different money. So that's why there is, let's say, these agencies in between, which are in most cases in international NGOs, who are the only ones who have access to this funding because they can show the financial requirements to actually fulfill it. So that is mainly the gap, and that is probably what Tracy was also a little bit kind of referring to, right? So your first option is either you work as contractor for these large NGOs. So when you are capable, you have a specific technical capacity, then you work as contractor for these NGOs, because these NGOs mostly do not have the capacity to actually fulfill this. So when you are technical capable, you would do that. And the other option, I would kind of say, yes, are basically the tiny embassy grants, which are annoying to do, but that is definitely the first step, basically, to kind of develop also your basis. So, and that means also for organizations, sorry, now I keep on talking. So for organizations, so often embassies then move, when you are capable of implementing your tiny grant, right? Then they like you, they move you then also to larger grants. So often they have then also larger fundings available. So starting with these small grants is definitely the best way but not all countries have them. I think you need to be specifically either lower income, least income, or lower middle income. Otherwise, you do not have these funding agencies as embassies.
And in general, to get a funding, you usually reacted to a certain call, either from an embassy or wherever from. So it was a state organization that published a call where you reacted to, or was it that you initiated the contact to?
No, we had both. Yes. So
Okay.
so we had both in the beginning. So but we were very popular as a movement in the beginning, although we had no organizational structure. Because we were heavy on plastic and against pollution. So we had we would just basically had discussions with embassies and say, okay, just let me know how much money you need and you will get it. So we had that in the beginning, but that did not for sure continue. So after some time, everything moved more structures and you need to follow the calls and that mechanism.
Thank you so much, Friedor. Great question. Really appreciate that. I know that even we at the U.S. Green Chamber and Global Climate Pledge, we've applied for U.S. grants when we've done some international programs. They're few and far between when you're in the United States and going abroad, but they still do exist. So really good question and great answer. And I see we have a question from John Barlow.
Yeah, good morning, afternoon for you guys. I'm John Barlow from Kailua Kona, Hawaii, and I was just wondering, with all this grant money, as I did just hear that you said there's some U.S. grant money. Is it money that, as like all grants, that you don't really need to pay for, or pay back, or is it something like to demonstrate that you can pay it back if necessary? My product line has yet to get into a facility so that I can launch the green motor systems and really take off in as far as what my objectives are, is to take off into the our oceans around here and clean up the plastics and debris, so it wouldn't be such a threat to our shores and our marine life. I basically am having an issue to try and get any kind of funding because of the lack of support from the mainland. No offense, but it's just that we're out in the middle of the ocean and nobody really cares about us. And as far as the not technology, but economy is concerned, they're too focused on tourism and visitors to think that, to go green tech or green innovations. And what innovations they are, or technology they are allowing, is that they recognize, which are wind, wave, alternative fuels and things like that, where new tech like I have isn't allowed, or tech similar to mine are being squashed from getting it online because it does work. I have a letter of support from the Natural Energy Laboratory of Hawaii on the fact of my systems being able to work because it worked exactly like OTEC, if you're familiar with that technology. And they've been canceled out or terminated as far as operations are concerned. And now I'm basically trying to get back on gear since we just had a lot of trouble with environmental programs being kiboshed by the previous administration. So now I'm trying to restart, and I'm just wondering if these funds might be available for independent small SME like myself to try and restart or reestablish the program of proof of concept, using the state itself as that proving the tech and capability of sustainability.
Does somebody have an answer that they would like to share? And I see that we have Dr. Hallam on the call. If you might have some insights, or anybody else from the United States that has had success in this area. And you're looking specifically for grants, John? Oh, you're on
Grants
mute.
would be nice if it's
Yeah.
cheap. I mean, you know, not high interest. I mean, I'm actually afraid of VC and or angel because they ask for such a high return RO, return on investment. And the private lender or partner or things, I got my ideas to make money, but no money to make the ideas, concept rich and financially distressed. And I'm retired and I've been at this for almost 35 years now before green beat was the trend. And so in Hawaii, trying to promote this and being from having invented it in Alaska, where oil was king, is king, I was pretty well put out the pasture, so to say. And now I'm just stuck.
Yeah, if anybody has any insights, my suggestion would be to keep an eye on the Inflation Reduction Act, because not all of the programs and not everything's been put out yet. And so we're going to be pushing hard for programs for small to mid-sized businesses. And we as the U.S. Green Chamber and Global Climate Pledge are also going to try to disseminate that information through our chambers of commerce. So if you have a chamber of commerce that might be in your area, they've traditionally been in the space of promoting economic only and not really caring about maybe always green practices, but we're trying to help our chambers of commerce be aware of the initiatives and the benefits that come with that. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But thank you so much for your question. And if anybody else has any other insights, please put it in the chat. And do we have any particular questions? I see we have some also in the chat, but do we have anybody that would like to raise their hand as well? And I see Safer Rwanda. Oh, is somebody trying to ask a question? Okay, I see a Safer Rwanda is an NGO working on climate change. Let's see, I think that's more of a comment. Let's see. What can we do as an improvement, but get grants from different funding agencies? We need to adapt and mitigate on climate change. That's, I think we've addressed some of those, but I'll punt it over to our speakers as well to see if you have some additional questions that you would like to ask or other insights based upon some of the questions that are coming in. And yeah, I'll give you a few moments to just come up with that. One, I think we mentioned partnerships, and one of the questions that I have, and that if any of you have some great collaborative programs that you can share, but what types of partnerships have led to funding for your organization? When you've partnered with another organization, it could be another NGO, it could be the government, it could be a business. What types of partnerships have you had that have led to funding, and can you share your story? And feel free to raise your hand if that's the easiest way for you to do it. And it could even be our speakers if you haven't shared that story yet. Anybody? Oh, John, you have an example? Let me see. Hold on. Let's see. As to
yes, I have an example. A reason why I don't have any funds is that I've been trying to do funding, like I said, for 35 years, back with SBIR, STTR, NASA, DOE, DARPA, and everything. And it was because the government is already confined or anchored in oil tech or the technology that's been established on all these decades as progress has been based on the oil-driven economy, that it's hard to get into, get money funded. And as far as what technology was allowed is those that have limitations. You look at your wind, it's not always uniform. You look at your sun, there's only so many solar hours. You look at wave, there's always a difference of where it can be put. And so technology has its drawbacks as far as working with government. And besides that, no offense, but I do not want to work with government because it's a ripoff. They demand that if they fund you, they will demand the rights to the data and information, and they can give to any government contractor that they want. And the originator has no recourse and nor gets any royalties. And the only thing you can do is become a contractor, and that's hard to do. And you only get the money from that. So I'm sorry, that's my experience.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. And I know we're almost out of time. I just realized we're coming up on the hour, but I do see Rahway, if you would like to share your experience, and then we will close out the session. But if you would like to share, and feel free to be on screen if you like.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I can't open my camera, some technical issues, but I thought that I might be able to share an example. So I'm from Tunisia, and my association, Réseau Enfants de la Terre, Children of the Earth Network. And so we started a kind of project with the UNICEF. So it is like a youth-led project to build the capacities of youth all over Tunisia to lead a research on the different impacts of climate change. So it started as a project for capacity building and technical support, and it ended up as a partnership for 5 years with UNICEF. And this project was developed for like 2 phases, ma'am. We just finished the first phase, and we're starting a new phase. So this is just an example that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great example. I really appreciate that. And because we're almost out of time, one thing that I wanted to make very clear and try to get out of each of you would be, if when we hold our next nonprofit or NGO event, what topic of interest would be applicable to you and your organization? What would you like to learn from others around the world? If you could drop this into the chat as we're closing out our session. So any topic that might be helpful to you and your nonprofit organization or others that you know about. What else would you like to know regarding funding, perhaps? Also, feel free to drop that into the chat. I know that Anji had put in our email address if you would like to reach out to us personally. And I think somebody who had asked just in general about the Global Climate Pledge. I think we put on our website, but it is globalclimatepledge.com. We see this as a vehicle to where we engage NGOs from all over the world. We have a map with reputable organizations. Your organization might even be on it. The speakers that we've had today have been part of our partners and our collaborators that have been growing with us. And so we've engaged them as speakers. We've written articles about them and their organizations, possibly. We have a virtual passport series. We promote each other on social media. I want to give a huge thanks to our speakers because they were so instrumental in getting the word out about today's webinar. So I really want to say thank you again so much. It was such valuable information for all of us. We're not the experts here, so we want to engage and bring everybody into this space. But we definitely want to hear from you. If you run an organization, especially that works with climate, we want to partner up with you and see how we may collaborate and make this an even bigger event as we grow. This is our very first one, so we'd love to get your feedback. We did want to make it very collaborative, which can be challenging when we have people from all over the world, different time zones, and different backgrounds and different initiatives overall. But I thought it was so valuable today. And again, many, many thanks to our team, many thanks to our speakers, and especially to you as attendees. So thank you, and we hope to see you at our next event. But thank you again, and please just continue to add, if you haven't already, just any of the feedback or questions and what you would like to see our organization do as another informational session. But thank you so very much for attending. And again, thank you for our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, evening, morning. It's been wonderful. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.